It's a cold morning in early 1985. 64-year-old Yutaka Kume, who has just been newly elected as president of Nissan Motors, sits at his desk. The yearly report has just arrived, and it's looking dismal. At the turn of the decade, Nissan had 1/4 of the global market share, but now, the company's share had dropped below 20%. Kume knows something needs to change.
カードが挿入されていません。
Located in the Kanagawa Prefecture, just outside of Atsugi City, lies the Nissan Technical Center. Within these walls, Kume is dissecting every aspect of his company. He paces in his office, frustrated. His company needs help, but how? He starts to think. If we don't understand why others are better, we will never catch them. This gives him an idea. We need to figure out what the other manufacturers are doing and do it better, he says. We need to reverse engineer their vehicles so we can make better cars than our competition. Kume calls in the order. Send our engineers on a round-the-world trip to tear down competitor vehicles and figure out where we are lacking. The engineers quickly pack their bags. Their first stop, Germany. Their targets, BMW E30 and Mercedes W201. Once the engineers arrive in Germany, they get straight to work tearing down a fleet of E30s. After some analysis, they start to notice discrepancies between the BMW and their Fairlady Z. European cars maintained stability and steering feel as speed increased.
Our vehicles met targets, but they did not maintain the same confidence under load,
says an engineer.
In mid-cornering and at Autobahn speed, our cars fail to maintain composure and steering confidence lacks.
Nissan had not figured out how to build robust suspension due to budgetary constraints and poor metrics. The engineers take note. On to the next one, they said. Next up, the Mercedes W201. As the engineers began benchmarking the Mercedes, they were just in awe of their engineering. Mercedes did not treat the body as a shell that suspension was bolted to, but instead treated the body as the primary suspension component. Suspension was tuned in a way that assumed the body would not flex. Nissan was trying to tune comfort and handling around body flex. Mercedes engineering had already figured out how to eliminate the body flex entirely. Work on the Mercedes wraps up, and Nissan has its sight on the next destination. Their next stop, United States of America.
These roads, they're just awful,
exclaims an engineer. Back at home, the roads were as smooth as butter. The Japanese government had poured billions of yen into the road system, developing new technology and performing meticulous maintenance to allow their roads to last for decades. During the early 80s, Nissan failed to account for suboptimal road systems when developing their cars. After examining and tearing down high-mileage customer vehicles, Nissan engineers observed that their cars felt noticeably worse with age. The rough roads had exposed structural weaknesses in their designs, such as poor bushing quality, causing the subframe to shift, throwing out alignment and excessive tire wear. Many customers also complained of increased road noise as their vehicles started to age. It was an eye-opener for Nissan and something that needed to be more carefully considered when designing future vehicles. Alas, Nissan finished up their work. Let's go home, they said. Back at home, over the past few years, Japanese buyers had acquired a new taste for smooth and refined vehicles. Consumers preferred quiet vehicles over raw performance. Reliability and consistency trumped novelty, and the satisfaction of long-term ownership was a must. Toyota and Honda understood this paradigm shift early, retooling their engineering processes to build each car exactly the same. Every Corolla felt like every other Corolla, and Honda engineering feel was top-notch. Nissan, unfortunately, never got the memo. Japanese buyers noticed that two identical Nissan Bluebirds could feel slightly different, varying in ride comfort and noise levels. Due to poor engineering tolerances, Nissan was quickly being demoted from the quality choice to the value choice. This really hurt Nissan as it was no longer being seen as the reference point. Sales were tanking and its prestige had been destroyed. Back at Nissan HQ, Kume is dissatisfied. After the benchmarking trips, it has become obvious that Nissan is lacking in many areas and they are losing at home in Japan to its two main rivals. Toyota, Honda, and even the European manufacturers were designing cars as integrated systems, but Nissan was not. Engineering teams were fragmented and siloed away from each other. Each group was working towards their own targets, but were unable to see the forest for the trees, resulting in the car suffering as a whole. The benchmarking trips quickly exposed that Nissan's measurement of success was broken. They were measuring success based on past models and internal costs and schedule targets, which gave them a sense of false confidence. Nissan was hitting their numbers, but their numbers were entirely wrong. In reality, they should have been measuring against global benchmarks, comparing their engineering efforts to other manufacturers. After scanning the budgets, the president of Nissan Motors realized cost constraints were upside down too. Cost targets for a vehicle were locked early, which meant good enough became the standard. Tight budgets prevented engineers from exploring new technology and improving systems such as suspension geometries or consistency of tolerances. Last but not least, corporate culture was a mess. Engineers hesitated to tell their higher-ups that issues had arisen. They used vague language in order to not be scolded, and problems were softened when reporting up the chain. Because bosses were not given the full truth, there was no reason for them to course correct, and the system remained broken. Once Yutaka Kume was able to ingest this information, he knew that better cars require better systems. Better systems would require a change in corporate culture within the company. From this, he starts to brew a new plan. He coins it the 901 Project. His goal, for Nissan to be number one in technology by the year 1990. He focuses on technological development of chassis and engines. Suspension and handling upgrades were also a must. Nissan had to improve its tooling and have better quality control. Cost was to be no object. Culture would be shaken and rebuilt. He comes up with a set of 5 rules. The first rule, benchmarking, becomes mandatory. No more "we've always done it this way" talk. Internal targets were to be thrown out. If benchmark data showed that our engineering efforts were not as good as our adversaries, then our design needs to change. No exceptions. Rule 2. Development reorganization. Engineers were now allowed to explore different concepts and prototypes without the worry of cost. If they could prove something was necessary, it would be greenlit for them to work on. Next rule, the Nissan Technical Center would become the execution hub. All teams need to work within proximity of each other for maximum collaboration. Rule 4, engineers will be protected when delivering bad news. If engineering teams run into an issue, they can say so without penalty. Any benchmarking results or feedback that comes in that are not optimal will be treated as facts and not failures. Kume's fifth and final rule, feedback loops must be tightened. Negative feedback given to us by customers, dealers, or manufacturing will be categorized. We will organize issues by frequency and severity. This will allow us to determine which issues are a one-off or a wider systemic design weakness. Systemic issues will be triaged with highest priority, and the architecture will be fixed immediately. Now that the rules have been drawn up, Kume turns to the chief engineer of the R31 Skyline, Naganori Ito.
Ito, I want you to develop a new Skyline generation, but this time I want you to follow my rules outlined in Project 901. To be frank, I want a world-class performance car competitive with the Europeans. It should use the best and newest technology and dominate Group A racing to bring back our prestige and reliability,
barks Kume. Ito takes the command. Development of the R32 GTR begins under 901. Their first order of business: re-engineer the RB engine architecture to make it bulletproof. Group A racing required teams to start with real mass-produced road cars. Using the RB in its current state would be catastrophic. If the engine was to fail, it failed publicly, and Nissan's reputation would be crushed more than ever. To re-architect the RB, the powertrain engineers began by overhauling the bottom end. They worked tirelessly to eliminate any risk of crank flex by fully counterweighting the crankshaft so that it would remain stable at higher RPMs. A heavy cast iron block was chosen to increase stability and resist vibrations. Connecting rods were to be given thick conservative profiles so that they could survive for hours at boost. The oil system was updated next. The team anticipates that the R32 would sustain high lateral Gs and hard cornering where oil would slosh away from the pickup tube. They redesigned the oil pan to have a high capacity and reinforced the pump to still suck up oil under load. Large, heavy engines require heavy cooling systems. The engineers calculate that the RB in its current form would not be able to sustain heavy abuse. They need to build out a new system that would cool the motor effectively, surviving substantial track use at maximum speed. They design the block to have large coolant passages and fabricate the head for thermal stability. Power would be sacrificed for extra cooling ability, but they believe this is a worthy trade-off for the RB. And who could forget forced induction? An engineer chimes in. The R31 uses a single turbo, but wouldn't a twin turbo setup be better? If we're going in and out of corners, we need throttle response ASAP. They start doing some calculations and weigh the pros and cons of each. A single turbo would give more power but require longer to spool. A twin turbo setup would mean lower stress per turbo, allowing for smoother power delivery. After some deliberation, the answer became obvious. The RB would be given 2 T's in its name. The RB26 DETT was now looking as tough as ever, but there was still more to redevelop if the GTR had any hope of surviving Group A racing. Another piece of technology that needed a redo was HiCAS, a form of rear-wheel steering that turns the toe slightly at speed for better cornering. HiCAS already existed on the R31. However, early implementations of it were gimmicky to say the least. Consumers complained that HiCAS was too slow to react, often kicking in after the wheels had begun rotating. This was a design flaw by Nissan due to the fact HiCAS was purely a hydraulic system at this point. For the bossed-up evolution of HiCAS, the focus was for the system to react quickly and be stable at speed. Nissan engineers used the ECU to calculate the rear toe adjustment by incorporating vehicle speed, steering angle, and lateral Gs into the equation. To get this iteration working properly, teams needed to work cross-functionally as well. The R32 chassis needed to be stiff. The suspension geometry had to be designed with HiCAS in mind. The ECU logic needed to be tuned alongside spring rates, dampening, and AWD behavior. After some time, the engineers come up with a new version and integrate it into the R32 prototype. The test drivers take it out for a rip at the test track. The drivers noted that they needed to use less steering corrections mid-corner and the rear end stayed planted under load. This was a triumphant victory, one that could not have been achieved without dissecting Mercedes vehicles years ago. They go on to name this new technology Super HiCAS. The R31's rear suspension had its shortcomings as well. During the R31 development, Nissan had chosen to stick with a live axle in the rear. As budgets were tight, it was a sort of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it situation. But the cost cut did not pay off. Whenever the R31 went over uneven pavement at high speed, the car would become unstable, often losing footing when cornering. For the R32, trying to re-engineer an old design into something new just wasn't going to work. The engineers decide to scrap the live axle in favor of copying their adversaries. They decide to go with a multi-link setup just like what was seen on the Mercedes W201 during the benchmarking trips. The suspension team was confident that this kind of suspension would keep the car stable at speed. Back at Nissan HQ, every day at the office, there is hustling and bustling. Countless hours are being spent refining every aspect of the GTR to make it the best it can be. The days eventually turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and months turn into years. May of 1989 has finally arrived. The first R32 GTRs start rolling off the production line. They will be ready for sale in August of that year. Everyone cheers. They are exhausted, but they know it was all worth it. During the summer of 1989, as the R32 was beginning to make its debut, news of the R32 started to make its rounds. A Japanese correspondent over at Wheels magazine, Peter Nunn, calls the new car an arsenal on wheels, looking set to challenge the dominance of the Sierra turbos. Fast forward a few months and it's now 1990. The stage is set and the GTR is ready for its debut season. On March 18th, the R32 enters the first race in the Japan Touring Car Championship at Nishi Nippon Circuit. Race conditions are perfect. The track is dry. It's overcast at the moment, with rain not expected to fall until this evening. Even though conditions are excellent, the Nissan team is still nervous. They've track tested the GTR and everything looks in tip-top shape. But there is still suspense in the air. Will the car hold up during its first race? They wondered. Was all the engineering work they contributed to the car under Project 901 going to pay off? The anxiety is killing them. Even though the team is tense, the cars are in prime position. Both R32s have qualified for first and second. The clock strikes 1 p.m. The cars pull up at the starting line. Lights out, and away we go! The engines roar as they go down the first straight. The GTRs slowly start pulling away. Their lead keeps getting larger as they bang out consistent lap after consistent lap, until finally they cross the finish line with the Calisonic GTR claiming victory, followed by its sister team, the Reebok GTR, in second place. The Nissan teams are relieved. Not only did the car survive the race, they crushed their competition. The champagne is flowing that night. The JTCC season continues, first to Sugo, then Suzuka, Tsukuba, Sendai, and Fuji. Nissan goes undefeated that season, winning every race it enters. Nissan snatches the title and crowns itself the king of JTCC. But it's not over yet. For the next 4 seasons, Nissan goes on to win every race it enters. It wins 29 times in a row. The advanced engineering of the RB26, the AWD system, and other technology makes the GTR unbeatable. The R32 rightfully earns its name Godzilla. Kume is pleased. The GTR is the best thing that's ever happened to Nissan in a long time. Project 901 is a success, but the success will be short-lived, and as the year goes by, there's plenty of hurdles ahead for Nissan. But that story is for another time. And that's another video. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, thanks for watching. If you'd like to support me, please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you could. You can also find me on Patreon as well. You can find the links in the description below. Catch you in the next one.